So I made a video a little over a week back now at this point talking about how I didn't love the trade for Carolina to get Sam Darnold. That's not to say that I don't think Sam Darnold has potential. It could work out. I just thought they gave up a bit too much. That was all. But after doing that, I couldn't stop getting hit with, well, of course Sam Darnold is going to be successful. Didn't you see what Ryan Tannehill did when he got rid of Adam Gase? And I just think it's kind of silly to make that comparison. For one thing, just because Ryan Tannehill had success after Gase doesn't mean that every quarterback is going to have success after Adam Gase. That's not really how that works. But there's actually several reasons why I just think that these two things aren't the same. And so I want to use some numbers to really talk about why I feel that way. So first, right here, this is Ryan Tannehill's passer rating for his first 3 seasons versus Sam Darnold's passer rating. Because you see a lot of people compare the first 2 seasons with these two guys, and those seasons are comparable. Darnold's passer rating was a little over 1 point better in each of their rookie seasons, and Darnold's was about 2.5 points better in each of their second seasons. But obviously in season 3 is when things fell off the rails for Darnold, whereas that's when we saw, another improvement from Tannehill. Tannehill steadily improved, whereas Darnold took a massive step back. If we want to look at Pro Football Focus's grades, which isn't, because some people don't love stats, which, listen, I'm not a huge stat guy myself, but Pro Football Focus, which, again, a lot of people don't love Pro Football Focus either, but they're at least people that watch the tape and make their grades that way. And for them, they clearly see, Ryan Tannehill had not the best rookie season, but then a really good second year and still a pretty good third year, which is, not against, it's kind of against what the stats say, but still that's what they say. Whereas for Darnold, you had a 64.7, a 63.6, and then it drops over to 58.4, which is just a horrible grade, quite frankly. However, some people might say, well, wait a second, that's not fair, because the argument is not, did Ryan Tannehill have a better start to his career than Sam Darnold did? But it's, did Ryan Tannehill have more success or less success? How did he play when Adam Gase was his head coach, which didn't happen right away? It actually happened a few years into his career. So let's look at those numbers. This is passer rating. So his career passer rating, Ryan Tannehill's, is 92.0. His passer rating with Adam Gase goes up to 93.1. This is including Tannehill's Tennessee years. So those make it a lot higher, but still he had a higher passer rating than his average season with Adam Gase. And then before Adam Gase, when he was in Miami, his passer rating was just 84.8, which is clearly on the lower side. So this idea that Ryan Tannehill looked like this awful quarterback, just like Darnold did when, Gase was gone, it just factually isn't true. There was plenty still pretty good about Ryan Tannehill, and actually he looked even better with Adam Gase. So if anything, Adam Gase kind of helped him at that point as opposed to hurt him, because he had up to that point, he actually had some of his better years with Adam Gase. Another thing worth bringing up is that clearly Ryan Tannehill is a better quarterback than Adam Gase realized, and Adam Gase wasn't able to bring, Tannehill to his full potential, but he also didn't completely tank Ryan Tannehill either. If we look at this chart right here, so what this is that the number all the way to the left is where the Adam Gase-led team ranked in points per drive that season, and to the right, that's who his quarterback was. So this is every year he's been either an offensive coordinator or a head coach. So obviously at the top, you can't really give him too much credit for that. He had Peyton Manning as his quarterback. I think it'd be insane to say, oh, see, look, he's actually a good offensive coordinator. And that's not my argument at all. Like, he's clearly not a good offensive coordinator. They did get 17th with Jay Cutler as quarterback, which is somewhat impressive, but keep in mind that team did have talent around Jay Cutler. It wasn't just Cutler himself. It then went down to 21 in his first year with Tannehill. If you remember, Tannehill got hurt this next year, and so Jay Cutler came back. That was his, just fantastic year in Miami. They did not finish very well, 28th out of the 32 teams, and then they stayed at 28th, even with Ryan Tannehill starting for most of that season. He missed 5 games, but he started for most of that season. And then finally, the last 2 years with Sam Darnold, he ended up finishing last. So clearly it bottomed out with Sam Darnold, but it was kind of on a gradual decline really for his entire career. So I don't know if it's really fair to completely blame Darnold for all of that. In fact, in Ryan Tannehill's last year, it was 28th. So just dropping 4 spots, I think that does kind of tell you that to some degree, there is some truth to Adam Gase ruining Sam Darnold. But honestly, I just think that kind of Adam Gase might get a little bit too much criticism for this. Again, I know that there's a long list of players who have had their best years away from Adam Gase, but I also think that there's kind of excuses that get made for every player who played on the Adam Gase team, which I don't know if it's totally fair. I actually think the much bigger criticism to be made should be just the complete lack of getting talent around Sam Darnold last year. Like if we compare Darnold again to Ryan Tannehill in both of their last years with Gase, Sam Darnold, this is just awful. 31st in both offensive line and receiving corps. This is Pro Football Focus's numbers. Whereas for Tannehill, still not great. 28th in offensive line and 18th in receiving corps. But that's still, miles better than Sam Darnold. So I think that's a fair thing to bring up. But again, to the people that are saying, well, Ryan Tannehill was able to have success, so therefore Sam Darnold will also have success free from Gase, it's just completely ignoring so many things that have happened. Well, I do have to admit, if you look at Pro Football Focus, Ryan Tannehill had a 45.3 grade his final season. It was only in about 500 snaps, so about half a season. So maybe that's kind of why it's the case. 500 snaps, very low for a quarterback. Very, very kind of surprising. But, he also had a 92.7 passer rating, so I don't really know what to make of that. But I figured I should bring that up, even though it's against my point, just to be fair. But we have to talk about the actual trade itself, why Ryan Tannehill left, because everyone keeps talking about, Ryan Tannehill got traded. But yes, he did. Yes, the Dolphins did give up on him after Adam Gase left, but it's not because they thought he completely sucked. It's because they were rebuilding and they thought he was just mediocre. People kind of figured that Ryan Tannehill was what he was. Like, look right here. I looked on Reddit and tried to find some comments of what people said right when the Ryan Tannehill trade happened. I really want to talk about what was the general consensus at that time, because this is important. This is a Tennessee Titans fan, and they said, there it is. God, I hope we didn't give up too much. Then later goes on to say, should say that I'm happy with this move as long as we didn't give up too much. We have a backup quarterback that is more than capable of winning us a game. That's great. And then finally says, I'm in love with this trade. My favorite part is if Marcus is hurt but can still play, it'll be so much easier to rest him and let Tanny take over. There was also this great thing where it says, can't wait for when Marcus throws an interception and every mouth breather starts calling for Tanny. But honestly, I love this move. And then people keep saying like, yeah, that'll be unbearable. That would suck, which is obviously hilarious in hindsight, given that Tannehill is their starter now and Marcus Mariota isn't on the team. So clearly that, worked out pretty good. On the Dolphins subreddit, there was this comment, which, someone said what the Dolphins got back, and people were surprised. That's way more than I would have expected. And look at the number of upvotes. And on our NFL, people said, wait, the Dolphins actually got a 4th rounder for Tannehill. What an effing steal. You also have Titans gave up a 4th round pick, WTF. So that's my point. And you see the difference in the way these two trades have been talked about. For one thing, Ryan Tannehill was traded for a 4th round pick. Darnold has been traded for a 2nd, a 4th, and a 6th round pick. The 4th and the 2nd and the 6th are next year. So that obviously not quite as bad, but still you see sort of the way Ryan Tannehill was thought of. He was thought of as a backup quarterback. Even Titans fans, when they got him, were saying, great, hey, Mariota, he might get hurt. Well, now Ryan Tannehill, he can fill in for us because Mariota keeps getting hurt. He wasn't thought of as a plan A. And if you remember, if you watched my video, the whole reason I wasn't really in love with this plan is because I just felt like you still need another option. I don't think that Sam Darnold should be your just number one guy. I think you just need a backup plan for that. And I think he should probably be the backup plan. But if he is your plan A, you're still going to need a plan B. To me, I don't love him just being the guy. So if you still think Bridgewater could potentially be good, then maybe you do that. But I just feel like as a whole, you don't do too well with bargain bin hunting when it comes to quarterbacks. And if you look at the numbers, I want to talk about peak for a second. Talk about these guys when they had some really good games. Because yes, it's true that both of their last seasons, they weren't exactly fantastic, but Ryan Tannehill had some clear moments where you could still see he was a pretty good player. He was just inconsistent. In fact, he had multiple games in his last season. He had 2 games in his last season where he had a passer rating of over 155. That's crazy. And by his last season, I mean his last season with Gase before Miami moved on from him. He also had a passer rating of over 100 in 5 of the 11 games he played in his last season. So he really without a doubt, had some success. And if you want to say, well, passer rating is a bad stat, but what everyone uses to talk about how good Tannehill is now is passer rating. I think that would be insane to criticize that at that point, because that's what we use to give him credit. Now, we want to flip it over now to Sam Darnold. His last year with Adam Gase, he only had 3 out of 12 games where he had a passer rating over 90. Forget 100, because he never had a passer rating over 100 last year. He came close. He had 99.8, so a bit misleading. But still, clearly, Ryan Tannehill in his last season was more likely to have a game where he had a passer rating of 155 than Darnold was to have a game of just 100, which is, I think, significant. And in fact, Sam Darnold only has 7 games of a passer rating over 100 in his career in 38 total games. Not to mention the fact that last year it was actually a lot easier than it was most years to have success on offense. So Sam Darnold's stats are just nowhere close to Tannehill's. They're just not the same situation. But I guess they could be, right? There is a potential for them to be somewhat similar. And what I mean by that is, think about how Ryan Tannehill worked. He was considered this kind of, athletic freak who really just wasn't great at getting to his second read. He kind of would stay on his first read too often, make some bad decisions. And so just simplifying the offense for him really untapped his potential. And I'm not sure if it would be that simple for Sam Darnold. It might be. Or you could just see something else. Maybe they see something that we don't see. And if you think you can fix him and you have a plan, well, then it's a completely different situation. And again, if this works out, it's a steal. I just think that I just don't know if it's going to work out. And I also think these two situations just aren't comparable. That's just really what it comes down to, is these are two completely different situations. But that's not to say that Sam Darnold couldn't work out, but it would just be a statistical anomaly. These things don't happen very often. So that's my point. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.